How many remember DGK? Dirty Ghetto Kids is a streetwear brand created by professional skateboarder Stevie Williams in the early to mid 2000s. DGK was one of the bigger brands during the early days of streetwear, and in fact, they helped create the genre as a whole. But when was the last time you heard anything about DGK or seen an ad? Wondering why that is? Well, I'm Nate the Great from TakeFlight214.com, and this is the rise and fall of DGK. But before we get started, don't forget to hit that like button for me. If you're a fan of the channel and you want to help us grow, then liking and sharing the video is the best way to do that. And the best part about it is it's free. It costs you nothing. But with that being said, let's jump right in. Skateboarding has always been a way to help outsiders shine. I mean, it's one of the miracles of riding one. It's kind of like a pastime that lives and breathes the city underdog rise up. And from their inception as a skate crew at Love Park in Philadelphia during the mid-1990s, Stevie Williams and DGK were looked at as outsiders among outsiders, marginalized from society for being skateboarders, and then marginalized again by local skaters simply for being dirty kids from the hood. So embracing their outcast status and repurposing the very name originally intended to shade them, DGK crew all but took over the Love Park scene only a couple of years after their formation. And although the original crew members slowly packed up and moved on, the name DGK and everything it had come to represent was forever etched into Stevie Williams' heart, and he carried it with him through the course of his early career. And at the age of 14, he too packed up and left Philly as he hitchhiked to California with some older friends and wound up in San Francisco, homeless. He ended up making friends with a few skaters in the Bay, and at one point in time ends up making good friends with Chico Berenice, who was riding for Chocolate Skateboards at the time. One day they watched Stevie's skate video and were impressed. So impressed that Mike Carroll and Rick Howard wound up adding him to the Chocolate Skate team. From there, Stevie pretty much took off. Everything from standout video parts in TWS The Reason, the Hot Chocolate Tour, the DC video, the DGK It's Official. He was also an official character in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater Project 8, Wasteland, and NFL Street. Following his meteoric rise to stardom, you would expect him to be content and rest on his laurels and just enjoy the ride. But instead, Stevie took a huge gamble, and in 2002 he quit Chocolate, arguably the most respected team in skateboarding, and once again became an outsider, but this time on the industry level, and in hopes of building his own board brand based on the name and spirit of his former skate crew. Partnering up with Tony Morgan and his friend Eli Soto of Gold Wheels, they launched an entirely new distribution house called Cayo Corporation in Carlsbad, California. And it turns out that Stevie's '02 decision not only launched DGK, the company, but ultimately provided backing for several other similar companies at the same time. In 2004, Stevie Williams signed a huge shoe deal with Reebok to launch the RBK DGK line. It was an attempt by Reebok to get into the skateboarding game, in a time where newcomers were not easily welcomed into the skateboarding world. And although the exact amount was never stated, it's rumored that Stevie got a 3-year multi-million-dollar deal. And in an episode at Complex Sneaker Podcast, he said on his worst months he was making over $100K a month from Reebok alone. At the time, it was the biggest skateboarding shoe deal in history. He also brought along some of his DGK team riders under the contract, including Wade DeSermo, Evan Hernandez, Lenny Rivas, and Marcus McBride. DGK was a skateboarding company first, but as time passed, they began to add more apparel to the collection also. The clothing consisted mainly of graphic tees, hoodies, hats, and various other accessories. The I Heart Hater snapback, among others, was a favorite with fans. They also did tons of collabs, including with Hot Times, Diamond Hardware. They had a Bruce Lee capsule, G-Shock watches, Love Art collection, cup noodles, and many more. One thing I'll say about DGK though, although they had a ton of collabs, most of them seemed in line with what the brand represented and served to further the name. The t-shirt designs were nice. Most of them consisted of cool art designs and slogans with cheeky or edgy humor that went right along with the just skate attitude the brand had cultivated. You gotta remember, this was the early days of streetwear, wherein mostly all brands really needed or offered was a lineup of tees with designs cool enough for people to want to be seen in them, similar hoodies and crew necks for the winter, and branded snapbacks. It was partially the reason why there were so many streetwear brands back then, because the barrier to entry was pretty low. But among the sea of competition, DGK managed to be one of the brands that migrated to the top of the heap. DGK capitalized on a special time in history. Prior to the early to mid 2000s, fashion culture was basically walled off into their own little boxes. But with the turn of the millennium, the paradigm began to shift. Thanks to the internet, the walls came tumbling down. Kids in middle America were wearing urban gear, and kids from the hood had long adopted preppier brands like Polo and Tommy Hilfiger. Rap and punk rock shared a similar spirit of rebellion and anti-establishment nature, and it all would come together in the amalgamation that will be later known as streetwear. By the time DGK dropped, fans were in full swing of a love of skateboarding culture. Rappers were beginning to showcase it, and skateboarding became cooler in the eyes of young black kids, as it was previously looked at as kind of a white guy thing. But when Lil Wayne began to talk about skateboarding and rappers like Lupe Fiasco dropped Kick Push, it opened the door for a whole new audience. DGK was in a prime spot to take full advantage of this, and this was evident when in 2012, DGK clothing began getting carried in larger chain stores like Macy's and the dreaded Zoomies. This obviously went a little against the main customer views of what Dirty Ghetto Kids would be doing, but as I said before, the clothing side was always kind of like an add-on, as the prime focus was the skateboarding. However, the clothes had taken off, so I'm sure the guys at DGK wanted to get them in the hands of as many people as possible. But if you've seen any of these videos before, then you know that places like Zoomies and PacSun seem to be the old folks' home where once beloved streetwear brands go to die. But the downfall wouldn't come overnight. DGK was so successful that it helped float a bunch of the other brands struggling on Kayo. After a dip in sales, everything at Kayo seemed to be crumbling. The team riders were jumping ship from DGK, Expedition, and Organica with complaints of not getting paychecks. Also around the same time, DGK was being sued by Rick Ross the rapper for $80,000, claiming that they had breached a contract of $10,000 a month and 7% of their profits. They wound up restructuring things so that DGK didn't have to prop up the struggling brands, and doing so saved them from completely folding. But you could begin to see the writing on the wall. Today, DGK is still around. The clothing has surprisingly never strayed too far away from the aesthetical perspective from the stuff back in the day. And I mean that in a good way. The current stuff is actually not too bad. The skate team is still around also, with riders that include Stevie Williams himself, Dane Vaughn, Josh Callis, John Shanahan, Marcus McBride, Boo Johnson, and more. When we look at the fall of DGK clothing, I think it was more a case of trends changing. Like I said, at the time DGK dropped, skateboard culture was huge with the normies. It was a key part of fashion at the time, and as a result, tons of non-skaters were wearing the stuff. And I think this kind of worked to hurt the brand's image in the eyes of the hardcore guys, because once the masses moved on to newer pastures, DGK was kind of left ransacked. To DGK's credit though, they seem to have stayed true to their original goals. Stevie is a skater. He was a skater back then, and he's never changed throughout all the years and his success. And all he ever really wanted to do was shred, make cool stuff, and help his friends out. And after all this time, can you really say that he hasn't done that? But what do you think? Were you a fan of DGK? Would you still wear the stuff today? Hit us up in the comment section and let us know. Also, if you haven't by now, then smash the like button. Liking and sharing the video, as I said, is the best way to help us grow from being the small channel that we are to a larger channel that can produce way more and way better stuff for you guys. And if you like to be updated every time we drop a new episode, then hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. This way you'll be dinged every time a new episode drops. But with that being said, I'm Nate the Great from TakeFlight214.com, signing out until next time. Peace.